I see Pamela has just come on.
Hi, Pamela.
Hi, it's great to be here. Sorry about the time.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Wonderful.
I'm very happy to be here.
And we're
Great.
very happy to have you here.
I'm sorry that I haven't gotten to speak to you before the meeting yet, so hopefully I might be able to talk to you afterwards.
I have 9:02 West Coast time. So, Gabriel, should we just begin?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
Well,
Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, across a couple of continents. It's wonderful to have everybody in attendance. Um, and we're here for the annual Ruskin Lifetime Achievement Award, which is bestowed annually by the Ruskin Society of North America. And we are delighted, no, we're honored to have Professor Dinah Birch as our recipient this year. She is with us today, of course. And we'll start the proceedings. They won't be very long. We should be done in about an hour. And so, anyway, welcome to everybody. Thank you for taking the time for being here. The Ruskin Society of North America was founded in 2020 by myself and Sarah Atwood, who will be speaking this morning. And we've done very well. And probably most important among our ongoing achievements is this award, which we're given annually. Our recipients in the past, we began with Jim Dearden, and then we moved posthumously to Van and Bird. Then we went to Clive Wilmer. Then we went to Robert Hewison last year. And this year we have, wonderfully, Dinah Birch. So Dinah, as I think probably everyone who is online knows, is one of the preeminent Ruskin scholars of the world. And she's been contributing to Ruskin studies since the 1980s, which is a long time and very much deserving of a Lifetime Achievement Award. She began with one of her major publications, Ruskin's Myths, in 1988. Then Ruskin on Turner, a wonderful book, which, as I told her this morning before we began, I continue to use all the time. Ruskin on Turner in 1990. Then Ruskin and the Dawn of the Modern uh, in, what was it, 90? What, Dinah, I've got the date all mixed up here. Doesn't matter. It was in the
Never
90s.
mind. Never
Then,
mind.
then, then a selection from Flores Clavigera in 2000, and an edition of Ruskin's selected writings in 2004. And then, most importantly, Ruskin and Gender with Frances O'Gorman came after that. And then her wonderful article, Ruskin's Womanly Mind, was published in 1988. And then just to show you that in her retirement, she's the emeritus professor at University of Liverpool, that in her retirement, she is continuing to be active. She published an introduction to Ruskin in 2004, sponsored by the Guild of St. George. She is, of course, a member of the Guild of St. George, and in 2023, she was selected to give the Ruskin Annual Lecture in Los Angeles by the Ruskin Art Club. So we have a person of great eminence with us today, a scholar of world renown in the area of Ruskin studies. We are so delighted to have her with us and so delighted to begin the proceedings in her honor and in, of course, Mr. Ruskin's honor. And I thought, since this only happens once a year, that one of the things that I would do very briefly is to give you one of my favorite Ruskin quotes to sort of give an emotive frame to our work. And I've selected this because many years ago I came across this. It's from one of his Oxford lectures to his students in the 1870s. And it goes as follows, and it won't take very long, which is, you'll be very grateful for that because Mr. Ruskin can be a bit long, as we know. He goes as follows. Let every dawn of morning be to you as the beginning of life, and every setting sun be to you as its close. Then let every one of these short lives leave its sure record of some kindly work done for others, and some good strength and knowledge gained for yourselves. That's it, but that's typically Ruskin in a very beautiful quote, and not only a very beautiful quote, but as I've thought for many years, words to live by. So Mr. Ruskin is the reason we're all here. Dinah Birch is the immediate reason why we're all here. We're so glad to have her. As is usual with these proceedings, we have a number of speakers who will speak about Dinah and her accomplishments over the decades in Mr. Ruskin's service. And so I'm going to hand the screen over to Dinah right now, and she will introduce our four speakers. Dinah, the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you, Jim. And I'm sure I need hardly say it is a great honour to be here today and a real pleasure. And I do have some wonderful speakers lined up who are going to very briefly say a little bit about our shared involvement in Ruskin studies. And the first is Robert Hewison. And Robert is himself a recipient of this award. He received it most recently, and no one could have deserved it more. And I'm not going to list all that he has done for Ruskin, or it would take far too long. I will just very quickly say that it is a lot. And I'm very grateful and honoured, Robert, that you've agreed to speak this afternoon. So over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dinah. I assume I'm speaking first because I'm the oldest, as you probably see. Dinah Birch was an important member of the little school of Ruskinians that emerged under Rachel Trickett, tutor and then later head of St. Hugh's at Oxford. There was Nick Shrimpton, there was myself, there was someone who actually didn't finish his thesis and whose name I've completely forgotten, except I think it was Lawrence something. Is that right, Dinah?
You may be thinking of Mick Simmons, who was writing on Fors Clavigera, and that was a
Yeah,
very good thesis.
that's right. That's right. His name wasn't Lawrence, it was Mick Simmons. Anyway, he ended up teaching at a very advanced school, as I recall. And then, of course, later there was Jan Clegg, and a bit later, Dinah was herself at St. Hugh's as an undergraduate, where she got her first in English in 1974. I'd got my degree in Ruskin studies by then, but I was very much around because I'd rented a cottage just outside Oxford, which, as it happens, I still do, and I will be going there after this meeting. Tim Hilton was also around in those days at the beginning of his mighty biography of Ruskin, and there was this sense of a little cenacle, as it were, of Ruskin studies. Dinah decided to do a doctoral thesis on Ruskin, and she chose a very important subject, which was Ruskin and the Greeks. She got her doctorate in 1980, and in 1988 she published Ruskin's Myths, which brought a really fresh light on what you might call the Greek turn in Ruskin's writings, notably The Queen of the Air. This was the first of 6 Ruskinian titles written or edited by Dinah. I particularly recommend Ruskin and the Dawn of the Modern. In 1980, Dinah became a junior research fellow at Merton College, and she was the only female. And I never forget going to dine with her in Hall at Oxford, at Merton, and sitting opposite a man who, as I understand it, never spoke to Dinah ever, because he so disapproved of Dinah's sex, this being the time when at last Oxford colleges were beginning to have both male and female members. Fortunately, in 1982, she returned to St. Hugh's as a tutorial fellow, and the Rachel Trickett tradition was maintained, for it was Dinah who supervised the late Francis O'Gorman, with whom she cooperated closely, and they were both at Oxford. In 1986, Dinah became a lecturer at the Open University, where she stayed until 1990. And this is the point about Dinah. She's not just a Ruskinian, a scholar, she is a teacher. There are another 8 books to her name from the Ruskin ones, notably the revision of the Oxford Companion to English Literature published in 2009. Dinah returned to Oxford in 1990, where she became a Fellow of Trinity College, where she spent 13 creative years, rising to become Vice President of Trinity in 2002. But by then, I get the feeling that Oxford's limitations, as well as its pleasures, were beginning to strike her, and she was wanting to spread her wings. And in 2003, she became Professor of English Literature at Liverpool University. Effectively, this was the start of a whole new career in which she became Pro-Vice Chancellor, which is I think the second most senior position in the university, for research and impact, and then Pro-Vice Chancellor for cultural engagement, which always strikes me as extremely Ruskinian in its title, and I'm sure in fact, I know, in Dinah's approach. It would take far too long to name all the things she's done. She's a great broadcaster on Ruskin, particularly in Melvyn Bragg's In Our Time programme, and a contributor to the London Review of Books and the Times Literary Supplement. The one deeply onerous task that I must mention, since it fills me with horror and dread, is that she served as chair of the Arts and Humanities in the 2021 research exercise, which examined all the British universities in terms of the quality of their research. So it's by now clear that Dinah is not just a scholar, a Ruskinian, a teacher. She's also a fantastically good diplomat, a great diplomat. Throughout all the teaching and the more public work, such as being a trustee of Liverpool National Museums, she's remained a Ruskinian, putting him in the context of the whole of the 19th century British culture. So, a Ruskinian, scholar, a senior figure in the world of English literature, a diplomat. And there's one last thing that I must mention. She is a woman. There's been no shortage of female writers on Ruskin, with Helen Viljoen to start. But the world of Ruskin has always felt predominantly masculine. And that has sometimes been to Ruskin's disadvantage. Dinah, however, has written sympathetically and understandingly about Ruskin's relations with women, and has shown how important what one might call the feminine side of Ruskin's nature, to use Dinah's phrase, his womanly mind, and the positive way in which he promoted, for instance, women's education. This is a distinctive aspect of Dinah's values and of her sensibility, and one more reason for congratulating her on this award. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you so much, Robert. I have to say, I hardly recognise myself. Very much appreciate what you have said. So thank you. So I'm going to move on because we do have more speakers to hear from. And the next is my old friend, Sharon Weltman, who has really contributed a huge amount to Ruskin studies and to other scholarship too, but focusing on Ruskin for a moment. She is someone who I've always valued as a companion in thinking about what Robert has just mentioned, Ruskin and women, her book Ruskin's Mythic Queen, for instance, but also something that perhaps we don't often think about in relation to Ruskin, Ruskin and performance, because that is something that's important to her work. So thank you, Sharon.
Well, thank you. And I also want to say what an honor it is to be part of this august company, and what an honor and pleasure it is to be speaking specifically at this event that recognizes Dinah's truly groundbreaking achievements in Victorian literature generally, and in Ruskin studies most obviously, very, very dramatically. And I'll say from the outset that the early essay that Robert mentioned, oh, and Robert, thank you for the incredible overview of Dinah's career, because all that I'm going to say will fit into the to that timeline and amplify some of the points that you've made. Uh, what the early article that I'm about to mention, of course, again, is Ruskin's Womanly Mind. And even though it was just a small article, its impact is enormous, so enormous and so immediately contemporary that right now I'm reviewing a book on Ruskin and women writers that just came out of Routledge that starts with Ruskin's Womanly Mind, and the introduction is all about that and how that made it possible for the author to write that book. And I can say absolutely, it made it possible for me to write my PhD dissertation, and it opened up the possibility for me to write about Ruskin and gender. But I don't know how that could have happened without that early article. So, of course, my presentation won't be about the whole career. It'll be about the impact. I'm going to actually start with a very personal story, which is how I met Dinah. And that story is, again, about her excellence as a scholar, because I already knew that Dinah had, it was 1995, I think, or maybe earliest 1996. And these are the dawn of the internet being a big significant part of our scholarly lives, and email as well. So I saw that there was a notice, I think on the Victoria listserv, that there was going to be a one-day symposium at Trinity College on, I think, Ruskin in the 1870s. And I saw that and I thought, oh, I want to go to that. How can I go to that? Maybe I could be a moderator or something, or maybe maybe, I mean, I see that the whole program is already set, but maybe I could slip in and be of some use and have an excuse to say to my university that I'm going. So I wrote a fan letter to Dinah in which I told her how much her work had meant to me and how utterly foundational it was to what was by then the nearly finished book, Ruskin's Mythic Queen, but not yet out. And she said, well, she wrote back, first of all, which was like, but she wrote back and said, well, no, we can't, doesn't really have room for moderators or anything like that, but come anyway and I'll take you out for a drink. So I flew across the Atlantic to have a drink with Dinah. And it was a great drink, some lovely outdoor place in Oxford. And she told me to stay in a hotel that was originally the home of Jane Burden Morris. I not only met Dinah at that drink, but at the symposium, I met Nicholas Shrimpton. I met Francis O'Gorman, who became a good friend also over the years. And it was an extraordinary event. And then later on, Dinah invited me back to the Ruskin and Gender Symposium a few years later. And I did get to actually speak at that one. And so that's how I got to know not only Dinah, but many of the people who have been extremely important to me. And I can't remember, Robert, if I met you at the first conference or the second, but I know we had a great conversation over pizza. That's my personal story. I want to also say that there's another book that we've already heard mentioned, and that's the Ruskin on Turner book. And that was vitally important for me also, because while I was writing my dissertation, it's the book that it was currently in the bookstores, like at Shakespeare and Company. I don't know if it even exists anymore, but it was prominently displayed at shopping malls in the window at Shakespeare and Company. And I could point to my family who knew nothing of Ruskin and say, that's who I'm writing about. See, it's on display right now at Shakespeare and Company. So they didn't think that I was completely writing about something completely unknown. So then I don't know. I forgot to set my timer, so I don't know how I'm doing on time. So, but I'm probably getting close. So I'll be wrapping it up shortly. But I want to say that it's been a pleasure beyond words, having gone from being a fan to being a friend, and going from someone that I could only think to myself as I read first Ruskin's Womanly Mind, but Ruskin's Myths and my Victorian education and so much else, that I was talking to somebody that I found a kindred mind, not just a kindred spirit, but a kindred mind. And it's been enormously important to me. And I can tell you before anyone else speaks that they also have felt this. So that's it.
Well,
Thank you, Sharon.
thank you, Sharon. And I remember that early Trinity Symposium so well. It was great. And it was quite important. It was just a one-day symposium, but it was the beginning of quite a lot. And I remember your being there. I can't quite believe it's as long ago as you say, but I dare say it is. I think it really is. Yes. And so I'm now going to move to Rachel Dickinson. And as you will all know, here Rachel is another pioneer in many ways, actually, and it has done a lot of interesting work in the field of Ruskin studies. And I, for one, particularly appreciate her interest in textiles. But she is, of course, the first female master of the Guild of St. George, and she has achieved an enormous amount in reshaping some of the Guild's activities and thinking through how the Guild can continue to be important in a changing world. So I think all of those who care about Ruskin owe a great deal to Rachel. And I, for one, have hugely valued our association over many years. So thank you, Rachel, for agreeing to speak today. And over to you.
Thank you, Dinah. I think I'm blushing slightly after that introduction. It's a real honor to be asked to join in this company. And I think we're going to have some repetitions and themes that are running through what each one of us is saying. And clearly, in choosing Dinah, the Ruskin Society of North America has alighted on someone who has had a huge impact in all kinds of ways. And I want to sort of reinforce a little bit about what Robert said in terms of just how influential Dinah is in the UK higher education sector. Being on that ref panel isn't necessarily something that's understood in North America, but in Britain, it's huge. It almost made sort of Dinah the goddess of arts and humanities for a couple of years in many ways. And what's really important there is how important I think it was to have somebody with a Ruskinian sense of the coming together of different disciplines, helping to shape how that particular ref took place. And indeed, her sense of the importance of that term cultural engagement. There are a lot of sort of synonymous words, but Dinah has also been sort of pushing the importance of us getting out of the ivory tower of academia and really interacting with the world to make a difference. Um, I can remember when she was the chair of the British Association of Victorian Studies, and one of her addresses she gave as chair was about that and the importance of us sort of scholars having an important impact on our world. And so having somebody of Dinah's caliber also being a Ruskinian, in many ways helped to validate Ruskin and defend Ruskin and offer that kind of easy defense when people sort of would begin to critique Ruskin. You could say, ah, but Dinah Birch. And of course, that's the Dinah of today and the last decade. But as Sharon's already said, that was also the Dinah going back to the 1980s, and particularly Ruskin's Womanly Mind. And if I can begin to turn to a little bit of personal anecdote at this point, when I'd begun to say I wanted to work on Ruskin for my PhD, I had not yet read Ruskin's Womanly Mind. And the waves of criticism that were coming at me, with Kate Millett being repeatedly quoted at me. And then I read Ruskin's Womanly Mind, and everything changed. And it was okay. And you could begin to explain to people why there was something in Ruskin that was resonating, even though virtually every woman I knew was sort of howling at me for wanting to work on Ruskin. And so I owe Donna a huge, great debt of gratitude for that. And I think as I began to sort of ponder, what do I really want to say about Dinah? What I want to say is that Dinah is kind, and she's a model of a scholar who is first and foremost kind in her interaction with others. And so I'm just going to give you a few personal anecdotes over the years. Like Sharon, I too wrote a fan letter of sorts in 1999, so just ahead of the Ruskin and Gender Conference, when I was coming across to begin to do my PhD in sort of the month that that was happening. And I'd written to her and said, you know, might I attend? And she wrote back and said, of course. And in writing back again, you know, got my letter back as a fan. But also that sense of even when I arrived, making sure that I felt welcomed into a whole new world of academics, which, as a Canadian from the east coast of Canada, it was a completely different world stepping into a conference in Oxford. And Dinah's kindness in that really stood out then and has over the years. So just a year or two later, at an early British Association of Victorian Studies conference, I suspect it was probably the first one in about 2000. There were a number of professors there and eminent scholars, and most of them were sort of off together, and the PhD students and ECRs were sort of together. And Dinah was somebody who was pulling the postgraduate students in and inviting us to sort of sit with her. I can still remember singing raucous choruses at a dinner. I think Only a Boy Named David was being sung, and Dinah was the one leading the singing in this in many ways, and just really putting the PhD students at ease. I can remember a time when I was chairing a panel, again, I think as a PhD student, maybe as just a postdoc, but barely. And there were two scholars who were getting difficult, for lack of a better way to put it. And as a sort of inexperienced chair, I was like, what am I going to do? And from across the room came Dinah's voice, just cutting through and gently calming everybody, bringing it back in and getting us back on topic. And she'll have no idea how grateful I was for that at the time. But it's still there as sort of a memory and this revelation of, you know, Dinah stepping in as a kind of savior in that moment. Again, an act of kindness and scholarship intertwined. There are so many other examples I could give of that. Virtually every time I've interacted with Dinah over the years, I've been struck by the kindness. And so for me, as I sort of hit the further levels of my career and mentoring junior colleagues, working with PhD students, I often find myself thinking, how would Dinah react in this situation? How would she make them feel at ease and comfortable and building their confidence as scholars? And so, Dinah, that really is what I most want to say, is just how wonderful you've been in offering that kind of sort of gentle, subtle mentorship in what it means to be a good and a kind scholar. So thank you, Dinah.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm really very touched by what you have said. And I do feel honoured that I have, if I have, been able to help you in some small way, because you have made, of course, such a contribution to the world of Ruskin. And it is a network, isn't it, of mutual support as we move forward. So thank you. And finally, Sarah Atwood, who's also going to speak today. And a special reason for feeling very grateful to Sarah for finding the time to do this is that I have so valued her work on Ruskin and education, which has been very important to me. It's something I've always had an active interest in. I am a teacher, as well as a researcher and a scholar. And I've always been engaged with Ruskin's work as a teacher. And Sarah's contributions have really, I think, taken that forward in all kinds of very thoughtful ways. So thank you, Sarah. And again, over to you.
Thank you. That just having you say that means a lot to me. There will be a lot, as Rachel said, a lot of crossover in some of the things I'm going to say too. I wanted to start by remembering 2001, when I gave my first conference paper at a conference called Locating the Victorians. This was a 4-day panel-packed conference held at the Science Museum in London, where I heard Robert actually give a keynote address. I was a graduate student at the City University of New York, studying for a PhD. I was planning to write my dissertation on Ruskin. I was amazed when my paper was accepted in the first place, and then I was daunted when I discovered I was placed on a panel with Dinah Birch, whose books Ruskin's Myths and Ruskin and the Dawn of the Modern have been foundational for me as a newcomer to Ruskin studies. I was eager, but I was nervous to meet her. After the panel, Dinah took the time to say hello and to ask me about my interest in and work on Ruskin. I think I was probably less than eloquent. I was a bit wide-eyed with admiration, but I was deeply grateful to her. And you can imagine what this encouragement coming from such an eminent Ruskin scholar meant to me and the boost that it gave to my confidence. Dinah didn't have to take the time to talk to me, but this is her way. She generously shares her passion for Ruskin's work and welcomes others warmly into the Ruskin fold. And I think we've heard that already from everyone who's spoken so far. So over the years, as I began to lecture and publish more, I crossed paths with Dinah at other Ruskin-related events. It was always a pleasure to see her and to hear her speak. I continued to read her new books as they appeared, her reviews and essays in the TLS and the LRB, and was often delighted to hear her familiar voice on Melvin Bragg's podcast, In Our Time, which Robert also has mentioned. It's nice when you pull up a podcast and then you hear someone you know, and I was always so happy when it was Dinah. Her work on Ruskin and education and on Victorian education more broadly has been integral to my own work. Her smart, insightful, and beautifully written books have challenged and stimulated me. And in this way, I really believe she's made me a better scholar and a better writer. In 2014, my dear friend and your dear friend as well, Clive Wilmer, who was so greatly missed, asked me to work with Paul Tucker and Stuart Eagles to organize a symposium on Ruskin and education. We chose Toynbee Hall as the venue, and we set about inviting speakers. I was especially keen to have Dinah give our keynote, and I was thrilled when she agreed to join us. The day of the symposium, she said something to me that struck me at the time and has stayed with me since. In the course of my talk on valuing education in a market economy, I had been critical of an educator's claim that students' enthusiasm and aptitude for reading is improved by, quote, exposure to books, any books. Channeling what I felt to be Ruskinian discernment, I'd argued that books like Walter the Farting Dog, it's a real book, and it's the example that I used, were too frivolous and to nourish a child's mind. Dinah, whose characteristically incisive and stimulating keynote had been on the demand for perfection, suggested that my judgment was perhaps too harsh, that a book that seemed frivolous might in fact be the one to spark a child's love of reading, that there wasn't one right way in these matters. Perfection didn't exist, as Ruskin himself knew. And as I mulled over Dinah's comments in the days and weeks after that symposium, I saw that she was right, of course. I had mounted a high horse, and I was at risk of cantering righteously off. Dinah was suggesting that I climb down and take a more nuanced view. So once again, she had offered me an important insight that would change and deepen my thinking. Dinah's wide-ranging interests and accomplishments, and Robert, thank you from me as well for laying all of them out in the way that you did. And Rachel, you mentioned too that they go beyond Ruskin studies. She served as a member of the Man Booker Prize panel in 2012. She's published widely on Victorian poetry and fiction. She's past president of the British Association for Victorian Studies and is herself an emeritus professor of literature at the University of Liverpool. She's also the author of Trollope, A Short Introduction, and has edited and written introductions for several of Trollope's novels. And we share this particular interest in Trollope, Dinah. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that I wrote my MA thesis on Trollope. I started out as studying Trollope, and when I told my MA advisor that I was going to switch to Ruskin for my dissertation, he was very disappointed. He hoped I would go on and write about Trollope. But I always retained my great interest in Trollope. In 2011, she published a new edition of Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford. And I've been happy to be able to assign Dinah's editions in my own classes. And I'll be using her edition of Cranford this fall in my Victorian literature class. So Dinah, I'm happy to have this opportunity to honor you for your valuable and valued contributions to Ruskin studies, for the many other contributions you have made to literary studies more broadly, and to thank you for your encouragement, your friendship, and all that you have taught and continue to teach me. Congratulations on this award.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really lovely to hear you and to mention Trollope. I've been keeping Trollope slightly out of the picture, but yes, Trollope is indeed someone important to me, and I've always felt there are more connections for all the differences, of course, which are legion, more connections between Trollope and Ruskin than we have always recognised, and that may be something worth following up at some point. But it's very good to see you, Sarah, and thanks again. And now at this point, I think it's over to you, Jim.
Yes, and I want to thank all of our speakers. They're all eminent people in their way, and they have certainly underscored the perspicacity of the Ruskin Society of North America in selecting Dinah to receive our award this year. Katrina, if you could put up a picture of the plaque, that would be great. Every year when we have a recipient, we have a plaque made in their honor. Here it is. We have a lovely little company here in Geneva that does award plaques. And here's one that I think is lovely. This has been made. It is in Geneva. I happen to be in California at the moment, but I will return soon to Geneva, our version of Geneva. And I'll pick it up and it'll be mailed to Dinah as the previous ones have been mailed to our earlier recipients. We have a great and eminent Ruskin scholar as our awardee today. And so I want to take this particular moment to representing the Ruskin Society of North America, which, as I mentioned earlier, Sarah Atwood and I founded in 2020, right at the heart of the pandemic. I want to take this particular moment to officially award this year's Ruskin Lifetime Achievement honor to Dinah Birch for all she has done for Ruskin Studies as a teacher, as a diplomat, and as all the things that everyone has been mentioning. Thank you, Dinah. Accept the award. I think all our members have logged on for the day of the board. Thank you, Dinah, for all you have done for us and continue to do in your active life as now a retired scholar. You have been an inspiration to us all. You continue to be an inspiration to anyone, and particularly women who are interested in getting involved in the great Victorians of the 19th century. So essentially, as a representative of the Ruskin Society of North America, I'm glad to bestow this honor on you and thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. And I think it's now my turn to speak. And
Yes,
what can I say?
you have your
But
5 minutes. Andy Warhol
I
was
do.
wrong. Not a minute, you get 5 minutes.
5 minutes, which isn't very long. And so I must try very hard to be brief. And of course, the first and most important thing I have to express is my gratitude. Gratitude to those who've spoken so generously on my behalf, omitting, I may say, all my many faults. So I do appreciate it very much. And gratitude too to the Ruskin Society of North America for giving me this award, especially to Jim Spates, who's organised this event, and to Gabriel Meyer of the Ruskin Art Club, who was such a generous host when I spoke about Ruskin and gender in Los Angeles in 2023. And of course, alongside those people, I'm thinking of people whose companionship has meant so much to me as I've thought and written about Ruskin over a lifetime, as some of them here today. An event like this inevitably brings on fits of reminiscence, outlines of scenes and thoughts perhaps worthy of memory in my past life, as Ruskin put it. And I do find myself thinking of those who have accompanied me in working on Ruskin and are no longer with us. Van Aken-Bird, Jim Dearden, Brian Maidment, Clive Wilmer, Tim Hilton, Francis O'Gorman, others. Together, they made a huge contribution to our understanding of Ruskin. Their legacy is something, again, that I shall always be grateful for. And here, Katrina, perhaps you could show an image of a somewhat misty photograph of my young self in those early days. And there's Brian Maidment in the corner. It is a bit misty, but it's a long time ago. That's the 2000 conference, the big conference we had in 2000, commemorative conference. But I don't want to spend the time I have with you all today entirely in retrospection. What seems to me exciting about Ruskin's studies as they currently stand is the transformation in what Ruskin has come to mean to those who read him now as compared to what he seemed to represent when I was an undergraduate in the early 1970s. An interest in Ruskin then seemed quite an old-fashioned thing, dusty and fusty. In fact, that was just starting to change after the big 1969 conference, the Brantwood Conference, which was the beginning of so much. And I was not even a student then, I was a schoolgirl, but that was a very important moment. But among undergraduates, an interest in Ruskin just seemed bizarre, and especially for a young woman. Young women then did see Ruskin, not just young women, as nothing more than a stalwart representative of an oppressive patriarchy. And just as a visual reminder of how things felt for women like me in those far off days, here is a group photo, Katrina, perhaps you could put it up, of Merton College's SCR, Senior Common Room, in 1980 when I became a junior research fellow there, the first female member of the college's governing body. And you see me looking, I may say, very demure and modest on the front row at the bottom right. And it is a picture that tells a story. Robert mentioned that not all fellows were delighted to see me join, but I should, in fairness, say that most of the men in that picture could not have done more to make me welcome. So those who held out for an all-male community really were very much in the minority. And of course, Merton College, like all educational institutions, has been transformed since then. So much has changed. And we do now have a richer, more nuanced picture of Ruskin's legacy. And of course, I'm not claiming that those with an active interest in his work see him as a secular saint. He can be exasperating and he is sometimes wrong-headed. But his commitment to what we now call the environment, not a word he'd have used, but air, sea, land, the value he placed on traditional crafts and arts, his primarily visual mode of argument. Robert Hewison's important 1976 book, The Argument of the Eye, a brilliantly chosen title. His insistence on an ethical basis for economic practice, his distinctive fusion of thought and feeling, and the intensely personal relations that he forges with his readers. Those things have combined to make him seem now much more central to contemporary concerns, no longer peripheral, no longer eccentric. And when I think of my own contribution, such as it is to the expansion of the field, the thing I'm most proud of is my work towards shifting the perception of Ruskin's relations with gendered identity and with the work of women. And a couple of people have been kind enough to mention that 1988 article, Ruskin's Womanly Mind, which was the beginning of so much for me, and not only for those who read it. And of course, many since then have taken up that baton. Some of them here today, and we've heard from Sharon and from Rachel, but other younger scholars coming behind, like Anne Longmoor in her, I think, excellent book on John Ruskin and Victorian women writers, published just this year, and others. I'm proud to have played a small part in this wave of new thinking, and I'm proud to belong to the community represented online in this gathering. Thoughtful, curious, committed, generous, collaborative. And I will say impassive that those adjectives don't always apply to academic communities, but they do apply to the community of Ruskin scholars. And I consider my years of being part of this community as one of the great honours of my life. So if we were meeting in person, which I heartily wish we were, and had glasses in our hands, which it's early for you, but not for me. Over here, it's late afternoon. If we had glasses in our hands, I would end with a toast. Here's to Ruskin, and here's to the future. And let's end with not this image of Merton College and its fine and scholarly men, but with Ruskin himself. Thank you. There he is. That's Fairfax Murray. So thank you very much indeed.
And thank you, Dinah. Very eloquently put. We have had a successful gathering so far. There's not much left for us to do, but we have a few minutes left. And so this is the point in the proceedings where we open it to members who've logged on if they wish to ask Dinah any questions or make comments of their own regarding our award. Now's the time to do so. I know that Gabriel has something he would like to say. Gabriel Meyer is one of the people that I prominently want to thank as we prepare for this now fourth bestowal of the Annual Achievement Award. Gabriel is the wonderful, estimable director of the Ruskin Society of North America in Los Angeles. He is a constant presence and has done so much for the Ruskin world himself. We at the Ruskin Society of North America sort of work in tandem with the Ruskin Art Club in Los Angeles. And so Gabriel has been instrumental in making arrangements for all of this. I want to thank Gabriel. I want to thank Katrina. who is serving at least her second, perhaps even her third term, so to speak, of our as our technical expert for this event. Thank you, Katrina. You've been a wonder, and thank you. Thank you, of course, to Dinah. Dinah has been from the first when she graciously accepted the award, uh, working with me by email and so on to make all of these pieces fit together. She's been a great help. And lastly, I don't want to miss mentioning Simon Seligman at the Guild. Simon is a kind of quiet presence in the Ruskin world, very, very important, very significant to all of us who are involved in the Ruskin world. And I want to make sure that I go on record as thanking him from the Ruskin Society of North America for all he's done to promote this event, not only this year, but in years prior. And so I guess what I would like to do now is turn it over to Gabriel, who would like to at least say something. I don't know whether you're going to ask a question or say something. Go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jim. I just wanted to make a very quick remark about Dinah. Um, I think, Dinah, we first met rather late in the day, I think in probably 2019 at the Huntington Library Centenary Conference on Ruskin, where Dinah gave a talk on Ruskin and women. And I remember, I think I came up to you after the talk and I said, I have never heard anyone uh, approach the twin dragons of Effie and Rose, pat them on the head, and then walk in uh, and take us beyond those issues in Ruskin's relationships with women. And I at that time, and certainly as a result of Dinah's talk for us, her lecture at the for the Ruskin Art Club in 2023, also on the topic of Ruskin and gender. Um, so deeply appreciated Dinah's reference to women and to women's groups, particularly at the end of the 19th and early 20th century, in the way in which Ruskin was received by them. In other words, taking our cue in part, not simply from our contemporary views of Ruskin, but from the way in which Ruskin was received by women in his own time, which was certainly for the case of the Ruskin Art Club founders, the women who founded the Ruskin Art Club in 1888, was certainly that influence was empowering. These were women who adopted the name of Ruskin precisely because Ruskin, of course, was not only encouraging them in terms of education, but beyond that, Ruskin was encouraging women to explore, to excel, to bring their particular genius into play in society. Certainly a theme which the Ruskin Art Club ladies, I think, took very, very seriously. So I particularly wanted to thank her for that, for that particular emphasis, and also for our topics, our discussions over coffee and other beverages on Trollope. So we had a wonderful time when Dinah was with us in Los Angeles, and I so appreciate the opportunity to honor her today.
Thank you, Gabe. Dinah, do you want to make a quick response to that, or shall I just go on?
Just to thank you, Gabe, I had a fantastic time in LA and the Ruskin Art Club, and it's really fascinating history was something I hadn't really known enough about until I had your kind invitation, learn more about that really very remarkable group of women who were in their different ways pioneers in a very new society as they felt at the time, because it was. So I remain grateful to you for that invitation. And I did have a great time. I enjoyed every moment of it.
Yes, I think that one of the wonderful things about this gathering today is that we have the participation of so many important women in the Ruskin world. And everybody has mentioned this, but it is absolutely apt to mention it. Ruskin's influence on women has been greatly underappreciated, but is now coming to the fore, and we should all be proud of that. Dinah, I want to ask you a question that I ask all of our recipients of this award. For many years now, I have run a blog site called Why Ruskin. Its intent is to introduce people to Ruskin and say, why have we forgotten this fellow? He's really pretty terrific. And I have many posts that I put up about that. But that's not the point. The point is to ask Ruskin, to ask Dinah the question that I asked Robert last year. I mean, you had so the British 19th century was just chock-a-block with geniuses in politics, in social matters, and of course in literature. Dinah, you had so many people to choose from. You had the great Dickens, you had Hardy, you had Tennyson, you had Wordsworth, you had Trollope, about whom I must admit I know almost nothing. You had George Eliot and not one but two Brontes. You could have chosen any of these people as your influence in your work, in your scholarly life, but you chose Ruskin. And so my question to you is really quite simple, but perhaps profound in terms of your response. Why did you choose Ruskin for your life's work?
It's a very good question, Jim, and I think there's more than one answer. Well, the first answer is it's something some of you will heard me talk about previously. It's a kind of family connection, and again, it's a female connection in that my great aunt Ivy, who was rooted really in Victorian thinking. She was the daughter of a gamekeeper in the rural East Midlands, but brought up very much as a lady, was steeped in Ruskin. She painted watercolors. She was full of Ruskin's ideas, Ruskin's works. She didn't name him when I was a child, but I talked to her a lot. She was a really important influence on my young mind, so that when I came across Ruskin as an undergraduate under the tutorship of Rachel Trickett, who was a Ruskin enthusiast, though she didn't really publish on Ruskin, but she knew Ruskin very well. He didn't feel strange and unfamiliar to me, nor did he feel particularly male. It felt intellectually a bit like coming home and knowing the place for the first time. But the second reason, I suppose, is a more intellectual one. As you'll perhaps gather from my professional biography, I do have what might be described as something of a butterfly mind. I mean, I like to work on so many different things: literature, political history, education, art. And Ruskin, I don't need to tell anybody in this meeting, is a giant, and he makes connections. And I think it was that more than anything that prompted me to choose Ruskin. I mean, I'm a huge admirer of George Eliot, and I have written and published on George Eliot. But George Eliot does one thing, and does it, of course, astonishingly well. Ruskin does so many things, thinks in so many different fields. We haven't mentioned, for instance, his work on Venice, which was so transformative in so many different ways. Of course, Robert Hewison has written very influentially on that. His work on history of buildings and architecture. There's just an endless list. Nor have we spoken, though we might, about Ruskin's importance as an artist. He is, I think, a great artist. And had he not been so significant in other ways, it may very well be that he would be more celebrated in that respect. So, given that I was very unwilling as a young woman, and I was 21 when I graduated, to, as it were, limit myself to one particular field and discipline, I wanted to work on someone who made all of those connections and made them real, but did so in a coherent way that brought them together but not just as a kind of random bunch of things one might be interested in, but all contributing to a kind of central thrust of meaning. So for me, there was absolutely, I have to say, no contest. It wasn't a difficult decision. If I was going to write a doctorate, and I was determined to do that, then I was going to write a doctorate on Ruskin. And I chose to write on the Greeks because that was, again, something that Ruskin, I think, still think, was a really important and influential writer. And also, he's worked more generally within that context on myth and mythical thinking. So again, there were other people working in that kind of field at the time, but nobody had made that bridge with what Ruskin represented. And so that's rather a long answer to your short question, Jim. Why Ruskin? For personal, intellectual, and professional reasons. And what a happy choice it has turned out to be.
Indeed, it has, and thank you so very much. We are all enriched by your interest in many things. Ruskin, in the end, considered himself a teacher. You are a teacher. Many of us who've logged on today are teachers. It is so important, at least to me, and I'm sure to many of us who are still with us today, it is so important to me to make Ruskin's ideas and his continuing relevance visible to a new audience. And we have done the best we can. And as somebody or a number of us have said in our contributions earlier, in the future, the idea is to create the future, to create the stimuli that will entice new people to undertake a study of Ruskin. Ruskin and women is one of the most important subjects in the whole canon of things that you can get interested in as you study Ruskin. Dinah, you have been a pioneer in so many ways, and we thank you so much for all you have done for us. It is a great honor for us at the Ruskin Society of North America to bestow on you our annual award. May you wear it well. I will send you the plaque soon, and you are now in an august company. You were in an august company before we even did this, but we are even more so now. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you for giving to us from your deep heart, your intellectual heart, your academic heart, your scholar's heart, all these new insights into Ruskin. May you thrive. May all of us thrive. Thank you to everybody in attendance. Are there any more comments from anybody who's logged on before I call an end to these proceedings?
No, I just want to say how really lovely it is to see everyone who's here and to be together in company like this. I agree with what other people have said and what Dinah has said. It would be so much nicer to be in person, but it's just really lovely to be part of this community and to share this and for all of us to be here to honor Dinah. So thank you everyone for being here.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Anybody else? Thank you, Sarah.
I thought that all of the tributes to Dinah, who is not finished with her work by far. She is still out there being amazing as a trailblazer and as a Ruskin scholar, but so much more. And I learned about so much more today, and I'm really grateful for the experience of hearing about the so much more. So, wow, I'm going to become one of Dinah's groupies now. After hearing this, very encouraging words today. But can I just say one thing? I saw this film last night, The Penguin Lessons. Have any of you heard it? Seen the film, The Penguin Lessons by Steve Coogan?
Have not.
Or with him. It's fabulous. And I note that Jim wrote something on his blog in, I think, 2016 about penguins. And he has a brilliant little video on it. But of course, Ruskin wrote, "One cannot be angry when one looks at a penguin."
That's right.
And so as Donna says, Ruskin makes connections everywhere. So he just never stops. And I agree totally with what Dinah said there, that you never have to worry about being limited with Ruskin. so you must see the film if you can, because it's very relevant to what's happening in the world today, actually, and also relevant to what Ruskin wrote about penguins.
Thank you, Pamela. Lovely. Anybody else like to comment? Well, thanks to everyone who's come on to the demonstration, the event today. It is a great honor for us every year at the Ruskin Society of North America to bestow our award on such an august group of people. We're delighted to have you here. May you all thrive in the coming year. We will be back next year with new honorees and hope to see you all then, if not before. It's been a wonderful hour and slightly more. May you enjoy the rest of the day in the UK or wherever you are. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so very much. Katrina, would you put the plaque back up as we end?
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinah.
Well, whether the plaque comes back up, here it comes, there we are. It's a very nice plaque, don't you think? I always like these with the roses on either side of our logo for the Ruskin Society. And a lovely picture of Dinah. Dinah, I'm so glad you chose a happy, smiling face rather than the face of you, one among 40 men in that earlier picture. So God bless all and be well.
Thanks, Jim.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.